Hey everybody, this is Silver Spook, and this is the Silver Spook podcast video with our very good friend and fellow game dev, and also fellow indigenous game dev, Meagan Byrne of Achimo Games. Been a big fan of Meagan and Meagan's games, and also Hill Agency in particular was a big inspiration for me. As a game that was made in the kind of cyber noir, but also like indigenous post-colonial cyber noir sort of flavor. And yeah, what?
Correct place.
Okay. And yeah, it's been a really great to watch the game develop, and yeah, I'm just really excited to be here. I really hope everything's going well for you, Meagan, and I hope there's a lot of I hope more people discover Hill Agency, honestly, because it's like a really important game. I think it's like a really well written game, amazing art, and everything about it was just like really changed my mind, or not changed my mind, just like maybe like freed my mind and made me think about things differently, about what was even possible. So, and long story short, thanks so much for being here, and yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for having me. Yeah, no, same. I mean, I'd love for more people to find out about Hill Agency. I just wonder if maybe it was too soon. It just kind of hasn't found its audience. But that's fine. I'm kind of I'm not like moving on from games. I'm kind of tangentially we've kind of talked about the fact that I've been basically sick since like oh my God, I think 2023. And yeah, part of that kind of healing journey was recognizing that a lot of what I was doing and being in the world was like very hyper productive, and I've kind of gone down a bit of a rabbit hole learning about how like productivity is the new church of capitalism, that we don't ascend to sort of holiness anymore, we ascend to optimal productivity, and we are the best version of ourselves because we can do anything for our basically are the business owners without needing any kind of rest or relaxation. And yeah, I was like, oh, that's making me sick, and it's making a lot of people sick. Um, and yeah, I think I've really been like, okay, you know what? I made Hill Agency. I'm proud I made Hill Agency, but the even doing it in a way that I thought was healthier, because like we didn't do crunch or anything like this, I started to realize was still not a healthy way of making art. It was so tied up in hitting these kind of, you know, goalposts and getting the finance and dealing with the business side. And I think part of going through that process made me realize that like I don't know like what people were talking about when I would go to these like be an entrepreneur, like be a run your own indie studio talks and stuff. Running a business is insane. Like it's an entirely different suite of skills, but also like it's mind numbing. It's so I almost want to call it like it's just pointless a lot of the times. Like what are you doing? You're letting this government agency know that you're operating. You're paying them this amount because you made this amount. You're dealing with banks and stuff. And I was just like, this is. I feel like really like almost like maybe I've gone too crunchy hippie, but I'm just like I can't do the business side of this anymore, because I just found it just kind of like ate away at any of the time that I had to put towards actually making the game. And I know like others have kind of talked about that, so I think this kind of last couple of years of me kind of rethinking like how do I want to sort of be. So right now my experiment is I'm getting an MFA in studio arts, and I'm gonna try being a fancy weird artist, and see if I like that better than being a tech bro business owner.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a journey. I mean, it is kind of like a well, indie game is indie being an indie dev is definitely a lot of work, no matter what happens. I mean, unless you're kind of just like doing it on the side, not that it's something wrong with that, but like if you're just doing it for fun, like a couple hours on the weekend, and then maybe forget about it for months, or but if you're doing it like like Hill Agency, like you were saying, kind of it can be you know it kind of, if you're actually doing it as a business, it can always be, it's either going to be extremely nerve wracking, because is this gonna succeed, is it not, like how are we gonna, if you have funding, then it's other layered pressure, and then it's there's a lot of questions about it, and there's a lot of work that does go into it, lots of unseen work that like when you have to wear the artist, the writing, programming, promotion, accounting, uh the promotion is like, for me, that's been like half or more of the work, so that's
Oh, yeah.
right, like that, yeah.
I hate it.
Yeah, so I mean, so
Yeah, we just did a new oh, sorry.
no, you go, yeah.
Yeah, we just did a new trailer at like it was half animated, and we put a big call out to like all the sort of major indigenous and non-indigenous like just newspapers and stuff, and like nobody was interested. Um, so it just, yeah, I get you on the nerve-wracking thing. I think for me, it's like it's less about the doing the work full time. That part of like actually making the game, that part I didn't actually have a problem with. I really enjoyed that. I was really happy on those days where I could kind of like go in and that's all I'm doing is writing or drawing or building or whatever. It was the sort of like dealing with like taxes, lawyers, HR, payroll, like the bank, these kinds of things where it's like, if we had, like, if we were in a socialist society, like, if we had universal basic income, then, I could have just been like, okay, well, I'm just going to work on this. Like, you end up doing so much extra labor, especially if you go the route of getting like funders and you go the sort of like, I'm going to call it like quote unquote legit business route. Um, you you end up taking on like multiple additional full-time jobs that the only purpose they serve at the end of the day is to facilitate funding coming in or payroll going out or people getting paid basically. And it's like, I just keep thinking about how under like a socialist collective we would just get together and make this game happen. And we don't have to have all this extra labor going into making it happen because we don't need to constantly like, prove that we deserve the money and prove that we're paying people properly and prove that, because a lot of it comes down to, paperwork proving that you've done a thing or cash being exchanged between different groups. And again, at the end of the day, I'm just like, it really is just a facilitation system for money. And it's like that's not the game. Like the game is that's just to let us live. And yeah, I mean, I think with the sort of hellscape we're under right now, I think people are starting to realize more and more just kind of how BS the whole system we're under right now is and how it does not have to be like this. Like you should not have to go to work in order to have a home, have food, have clothing, clean water, electricity. Like you should be able to like go to work and have those things confirmed anyways because I think we want to work. Like people want to work. We want to make things happen. We want to help each other. We want to build things. We want to make stuff happen. So like this whole the way capitalism works right now with like basically it constantly threatens you like it's this like Puritan idea that somehow like if you don't threaten them they're not going to want to work. And I was like, I know homeless people who have no jobs who like make beautiful paintings. That's work. I know people who, are not considered physically able to do standard desk jobs and they take beautiful care of their park and their neighborhood. Like that's work, that's labor. Like don't tell me people don't want to work. Like, people want to work. Sorry, this is totally aside from what you actually asked. I think this is part of my healing thing. It's just all this anger I have at capitalism coming out of my bones.
Well, that's okay. That's what everything I do is about. So it's just the Silver Spook is anti-capitalist everything, anti-colonial, games, streams, podcasts, and so you're in good company. That is the topic of my. Speaking of
Yeah, I
promotion,
know. That's why I
Real
love your
Feud
game.
2, an anti-capitalist, anti-colonial video game. Anyway, so yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying though. Yeah, it's no, it's I think that is like part of the industry. I just noticed, not part of the industry. That's part of like where a lot of people are at, and a lot of people who work in around games are at. I noticed it even more so when I was just because I'm setting up the Neo 2 Steam uh, storefront and site, etc. Neo is on itch, but I'm setting up the Steam is a little more involved. Anyway, I was looking at the tags,
Yeah.
and like capitalism is like a top tag. Like dealing with games that deal with that topic specifically, you can choose that because there's a lot of
Yeah.
games that are because obviously most indie, a lot of game devs, right, are people because you're kind of mentioning about how like making the game is it's work, but it's like enjoyable work and it's manageable work, and then just like justifying the existence of like capitalism itself, and like it's just like a lot of the work that's done is basically like it's the BS job. It's like a money laundering scheme to justify
Yeah.
why the people that make 60 or 100,000 a year, justifying why there's millionaires and people with billions, right? Without actually
Mhm.
producing anything in particular. It's just the finance, insurance, real estate, just the churn of people like showing up, doing various, the TPS reports on office space, right? But a lot of that doesn't really need to be done. There's a certain amount of,
Mhm.
paperwork and due diligence, that needs to happen, just to, prevent like, unnecessary fraud. Most of the fraud is being committed by the billionaire class, right? So, and,
Right.
and none of that's
Exactly.
being enforced, right? Yeah. So I, and like, man, I totally get that. That's, and, a lot of that, yeah, a lot of that work it doesn't need to exist, right? It exists because there's a because partially because of the colonial structure where you have a global north that has vast resources, a lot of it sucked in from global south that's doing like it's not necessarily
Hmm.
doing specifically beadwork, painting images or cleaning parks, but it's like producing real essential goods, whether that's the phones, that the semiconductors, the agricultural products, the getting the energy out of the ground or out of the sky, or producing the actual physical goods, everything that you buy in your
Hmm.
Walmart or your Target or on your Amazon and anywhere else, right? And so all that that is sucked into unfortunately like places like the global north. um uh Not that people shouldn't have those resources, but then people are kind of stuck in these kind
Yeah, but it
of.
just doesn't mean.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be at this level, and it doesn't need to be at this, like, you don't need people working. Like, you don't need slaves digging in a mine right now. Like, we don't need this. We have too much of everything. Like, we have the capability at this point right now that we could have a fully functional, everyone fed, everyone clothed, everyone have your fancy gadgets too, without exploitation. That is actually possible at this point. It could be possible at this point, but it's just, number don't go up when we don't exploit. And that's literally the whole, like, I guess that's my frustration with the whole system too. It's like just a bunch of people playing a video game that, this meaningless number go up cookie clicker, and it requires the suffering of children in order to be powered. And I'm just like, we just need to take the game away from them, because at this point it's like, no, this game needs to be destroyed. And I mean, I personally think that we are headed that way. I kind of tell people that I think we're in, what I call dead stage capitalism. So we're past end stage. Dead stage, it's the part where the organs start to explode. So we're starting to see the first stages of like decomposition, and I think we are seeing it with, I mean, like, meme wars. This is like the idea that, like, like countries would be fighting with memes is like, I was like, yeah, no, this is over. This old world is over. I don't know what the hell we're going into. I'm hoping it's like much better, but I think, yeah, we're seeing this like tipping point in the majority in all places of, yeah, we don't need to live like this anymore. It's like we can still have all the nice things and not live like this. It just requires everybody, like I guess that's the other thing, is requires everybody working and requires all the resources to be distributed fairly. And again, it's the people playing the fueled by children's pain game that are just like, no, you shouldn't have that, and they cannot give a good justification as to why, other than the idea that they somehow earned it. And I was like, I don't feel like you've earned that more than somebody working in a sweatshop working on like what 1,000 teddy bears a day. Like they're definitely working harder than you are. So maybe, yeah, and again, like I think we're also seeing the lie that was sort of metocracy being destroyed in front of everybody's eyes. Like in some ways, that was like the good thing Elon Musk was for, was showing just how like, no, these guys are idiots. They don't deserve this money. They didn't work any harder. You're the one working hard. So I am very happy that that's like the average person is starting to see that very clearly. So I am very hopeful.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, totally. Sorry, my camera just. Yeah, it's definitely something that's. I think the decomposition phase is something that we're definitely entering into. Yeah, I mean that's partially what I was trying to explore. In well, actually central to what I was exploring in EFP2 is like how like unhealed descendants of the Roman trauma is what they're described as, which
Yeah.
in the game by like billion-year-old. They're like basically like kind of an amalgamation of like indigenous, Turtle Island, North Central South America, the Pacific, Asia, Africa, like ancient peoples, right? That came like in Hawaii we call it Ahupua'a system, which is what part of what we're part of the green shoots growing from the taro patch growing from the decomposing U.S. military occupation to maintain a global capitalist planetary system is trying to restore the pre-existing. We call it like Ahupua'a. Basically, it's a form of agricultural terracing that is actually based way back in like the Beijing region, the Chinese Delta, where they first created this like very sophisticated method of using the water into terraced rice paddies, right? So that you put
Oh
almost no
yeah.
effort into, right? It's 3,500 years ago in the northeast China, and so that you have to it takes human work. We're talking about human work. It does take work. You have to set it up. A lot of it's at the front end to set up these like you have to build rock walls. You have to you have to do some terraforming, but you have to change the landscape a bit. But once you do that, the water will flow naturally without. It's all basically gravity fed, and using the rain that naturally falls in that region. Here in Hawaii, we have a lot of the mountainous regions are like almost like mini Beijing's, or in one sense, or like small
Cool.
regions where a lot of work was put in, and you have to maintain it, and you have to coordinate it, right? So people have to. You kind of already need an existing non-capitalist system that is not about selfish individual pursuit, right? Like you're talking about the child pain profit maximizing, paperclip maximizers for dollars kind of people. If you have those kind of people, Elon Muskian, capitalists, or feudal kings extracting the rents from the serfs. That's part of what Neophyte is. CEO kings, or Greek oligarchs with slaves. If that kind of people exist, you can't really do a system, and you can't really do successful like long term coordinated it's a kind of permaculture that's throughout Asia Pacific. Now you can have corruption in it. It's not impossible to have like humans wanting to manipulate their fellow humans accumulate vast quantities of wealth for themselves. But there's a whole host of methods to deal with that in our society. So like basically, it was 99% communism, 1% somebody in one district, one valley, right, from the mountain to the sea. This is how we subdivided the land. And these kind of like these mini Northeast China. It's not Northeast China, but it's like mini regions, right? Each valley kind of has one like set of streams, smaller streams that coalesce into a larger stream, and then there has to feed through this organized system that's been set up over centuries, right, or decades, but eventually you want it to perpetuate into the future, right? So if somebody begins to hoard it causes, it's going to cause environmental problems. It's also going to cause wealth inequality problems. It's also going to disrupt the whole structure that's feeding and taking care of and providing medicine, right? Food, housing, clothing. Like the Medicare for All program is the Aopoa system, right? The housing justice, the housing program is that system, right? Where things are built and distributed. A part of it is also that everything is provided according to ability and given out according to need. That's what we're practicing here locally. Every week we go up and we're trying to restore that system. It's part of it is like de-dollarization, like literally physically removing the yeah. It's a native Hawaiian de-dollarization, socialism with Hawaiian characteristics, like trying to regrow out of the collapsing. Every time the U.S. does something really foolish, like threatening to cut off all the food stamps or just like causes some massive inflation, jacks the price of electricity to $20 a gallon or just way higher. Like now, it rapidly increases. Like you can see like the increase of how many people are, and how much energy is going towards this kind of like a hybrid overlaid, two realities. There's the Hawaiian reality and economic and social reality, and then there's the American capitalist Western one. Not to say Americans can't, necessarily, they're fundamentally tied to it.
That's the thing that yeah, sorry, I mean, yeah, no, just like you're speaking my language, but like I think that's the big thing for me that the capitalists like don't understand is because I think they've bought into the lie that capitalism is natural. Like they bought into the naturalization lie, where this idea that like, oh, this is just how it is. I'm like, no. This is all like imaginary rules that we've agreed to. But there's a contract, right? There's a contract in any society, which is essentially, I think that the majority cannot be in pain. Like I think that's the basic human contract that we enter into with each other when we agree to these rules that again there's nothing tangible making you do that other than state violence. But I think the big thing is we need to remember is as soon as it starts to be hurtful to the majority, then it falls. Like that's just how people are. And I mean, I hope that we're moving towards a more like empathetic society where it doesn't have to be the majority. It could just be the minority points out that something is a problem, and instead of everybody being like, we'll wait until it gets bad, they just are like, yeah, you know what, maybe we don't eat those poison berries en masse, like that idea. But they don't understand that, and so they push and they push and they push because they just think it's going to be like this forever. And it's so wild because like I know some of these people went to like Yale and Harvard and stuff. I know they studied their history. Like most of them are giant Roman buffs. How do you not know what happens when this shit falls apart? Like, how can you be these people who claim that you've studied history and not understand the fundamental thing, which is that you have no power here if you push too far. Then you lose everything. And like it's happened again and again and again. And I mean, I guess that's also why they're kind of planning for these like bunkers and like, do we need shot callers for our militia slaves that we're going to be kidnapping? I don't know. I honestly thought that the worst thing that was going to come out of the Epstein files was that there's some secret child army that's brainwashed that they've been building, just because they want to be really sure that their slaves aren't going to turn against them, which is like that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works.
Yeah. It is kind of weird. I mean, that's like I think I'm trying to think of that quote. That's like was it like Nero fiddled and like Louis ate his brioche, you know, and then the and then in the other two, there's like the Star Spangled Space Romans, and they just it took what's 9 days for Rome to burn, you know, a few days for the American capital in this fictional world is destroyed, and then they escape the Earth that they've destroyed and go to space, and then they repeat they call it the Achillean, which is comes from the Roman eagle. That's their symbol. They keep using the American eagle, harkening back to the Roman eagle, and they just spread. The eagle spreads its poisonous wings across the galaxy, and so then the Galactic Silk Road has to try to deal with that. So, which is kind of partially what's happening on the Earth. It's just the global majority, which is the global majority is not coming from that. Not that they don't have internal problems, but they don't like hearken, because like you're saying, there's a lot of people that are big, the Greek statue Twitter, like the Roman buff, like how often do we think of Rome? Elon Musk asked everyone, right? And the people who said I think about it all the time. These are some of the most toxic tech biz bro crypto, pushing people, right? And I think they do think about it a lot. There's something I remember having like this, one of my friends is like a antiquities studies, like definitely of the left end of the spectrum, but studies like Greece and Rome. And there's some, like, it's weird because there's some denial. It's like, no, the Greek, which obviously had patriarchal and Afro-Asiatics, forced labor, unpaid labor, if you want to be nice about it, slaves. Just like the Americans had patriarchal, unpaid black labor on stolen indigenous land. And there's all this kind of like this denial that like, no, we're different. We're like, we are not, this is totally different. It's a separate system. Yes, there was some capitalism. It was invented in the 1600s. And now now we're democratic capitalists. We're democratic capitalists. And it's like, well, they had quote unquote votes in Greece and Rome, and some people believe that meant democracy. It's still like the votes were from the boardroom. That's what really always mattered. It was a tiny minority of wealthy oligarchs that chose what was going to happen in their countries, in their entire societies, in the Greek and Roman, and also the British and the French, certainly the colonial empires, and certainly the American one. It's nothing, that's one of my things that I'm in this constant kind of I kind of find it interesting to watch how not because it's necessarily their fault, because I think a lot of people are just taught the way they're taught because control of information by imperial capitalists, by the descendants of the Greek and Roman oligarchic structures, right? That's the way that you must educate you must misinform, or as our comrade Luna Oy would say, you must condition your oppressed, right? Because otherwise, they would understand what we're talking about, that this is a terrible system. And it's not just the most terrible system, as Churchill said, amongst all the others, right? It's the most terrible system except for all the others. No, it literally is like the worst system. And there's way better systems, like with various there's socialisms and other kind of systems with various characteristics which have existed across the earth, and so trying to stop everyone from understanding that and cutting everyone else off from the wealth of human history, which is the vast majority are not, like, just it's 4 to 10% of the planet, depending on how you count, that counts as quote unquote the West, right? Which is that Europe, and then the settler colonies of Europe, and there's a couple that count as quote unquote the free world, but that's a tiny minority of the earth. Even in just the Pacific, there's like 450 million people here. It's more than all of the United States and Canada, Australia, and New Zealand combined, and Britain, right? So and that's not even Asia. Is like, if you take the Southeast Asia and the Pacific, if you count like China, ASEAN, and like our region where we are, that's 70% of the earth, right? And that's not counting Africa, which is that's a billion people, and and obviously there's indigenous people all over Turtle Island. That's and all that history is not taught, because it is a history that is for a long time succeeding in the kind of the kind of systems that we were just talking about, and trying to cut, that's why it's kind of like it's not so much that necessarily because you're American, or your nationality is bad or something. Even something about you. Even if you decided I was gonna go be a biz bro and try to make tons of money on Wall Street, even Elon Musk himself, it's like Elon is a descendant of, right, the oligarchic class that can
Mhm.
trace all the way back to the Greek, the Roman Caesars and the Greek oligarchy, and he himself is like he has been harmed by his own family and his own systems misraising and his like lack of rearing, because there's a version of Elon where he is a skilled programmer that doesn't like break Twitter and like waste $44 billion, waste that technology. There is a version of Elon that is capable of making rocket ships, but like he never has had the chance to explore his actual talents, because he was obviously given everything he's ever wanted, and was never taught to respect his fellow humans because of who raised him. Anyway, yeah, I could go off on that too long. So yeah, go
I
ahead.
think you're getting to something that, and I think it's needs to be part of the conversation when we start talking about, getting rid of the billionaire class. Is like, we can't, we have the benefit now that, the French Revolution didn't have, which was we have psychology. We had Freud and Jung, and we have neuroscience, and we have all this. We understand more today about how the human mind works than we have ever understood in the entire history of the species. And that's so important because, we now understand that there is a thing called mental illness. And I mean, we had concepts for this, like the Anishinaabe and the Cree had concepts for mental illness. We don't know how far back because a lot of that information was destroyed, but we have words for that stuff. I mean, one of the interesting things I found in part of my like language exploration of learning Cree is the word for the man-eating monster that we will not name because it's outside of winter, and we don't say that word outside of winter, but starts with a W. But that word in Cree, and I don't know about Anishinaabe specifically, but Cree, which is a sister or under that umbrella, maybe a daughter language, whatever. And so that word, I thought what it meant was flesh eater, man eater, something like. No, that's not what it means. It's the word for sickness and brain. So sick mind. So this word that means, cannibal monster, really the heart of it is sick mind. So this is a concept that has existed for a while, that you can have a sickness of the mind. Billionaires are sick. They have a sickness of the mind. And one of the most interesting things that I've noticed in the study of, I guess we would call it scarcity, like the mental impact of scarcity. I've been interested in this for a while because I dealt with poverty for a chunk of time in my 20s, and it did a lot of damage to the way that I interact with the world and I see the world. And we understand now that when someone lacks, especially if it was in their early formative years, or if it was a very traumatic lack, like a sudden loss of home, a sudden loss of family, can have long reaching impacts on how that person interacts with the world going forward. We also know through our studies of child rearing that you can pass on mental illness. You can pass on ways of thinking about the world, and in that own way is a mental is becomes a mental sickness because it's a untreated it's untreated injury of that person's psyche, of that person's mind, of their spirit, that they're now passing on to their kids. And that's essentially what the billionaire class is. They are deeply, like deeply, more than I think any average person could understand, in this sickness of lack, where they legitimately do not believe that they have enough. And it's a sickness because they have more than enough. And that's where it becomes a sickness, is when you think, it's kind of a schizophrenia, right? Where you think you have nothing and you have everything, and you need more and you need more. And so, yeah, that's essentially what the cannibal monster is. It's something that can't be full because it starved so bad once, that nothing it fills its stomach with makes it feel full. And that's because it has to recognize that it is full. It's this weird, interesting thing about how our brains work, and it's something that's built into the four directions and the four medicines, is that to heal a mind, it's very similar to how you like if you have a physical injury, you need physical intervention. If you have a mental or spiritual injury, you need mental and spiritual intervention. And I mean, you really do need all that for any type of injury. And so it's a combination of things. And that's one of the things I would like to see come up more in the conversation is like, how are we going to heal the wound that had created the billionaire class? How do we heal that? Because if we don't heal it, it'll just keep coming up again and again. Like we have an opportunity now, I think, to yeah, sure, tax the rich, all this stuff, but like, I don't know, this sounds really bad, but I think it's like better than killing them. Is instead of rounding them up and executing them, round them up and put them in a mental institution where you can like start treating them because they have a sickness. I mean, I actually think that would be horrific. I have a big problem with how mental health is treated currently, and I don't love the mental health hospital system, but executions at the end of the day aren't going to solve the deeper problem, that what caused this in the first place. And it's like, you've said, it's that continuation of that sort of like Roman wound. And I think there's a lot built up in that we're kind of ignoring, because we also kind of understand a bit of the history of like where some of these wealthy people came from, and some of them came from nothing. And I imagine that again, if you have that first origin point of the wealth build, is doesn't think anything's enough, they're going to pass that on to their kids, and their kids are going to pass that on, and it just doesn't matter how much the wealth builds, because they still believe this primary wound, this father wound, that they didn't have enough and they will never have enough, and so they always have to work harder, or they have to steal, or they have to hurt in order to get more, because they're like children. They're like injured children. And I don't mean to say that in the sense of like, oh, we should coddle them. But I mean that in the sense of like intellectually, mentally, they are when it comes to this wound, it's like talking to a 6-year-old, right? It's a 6-year-old in an adult body with a black card, and they can get anything they want. Like, no wonder they're so crazy. Would you give a 6-year-old a credit card with no limit? You know what kind of weird shit they would do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and you kind of mentioned like how like if you come from coming from extreme scarcity, you can suddenly get that kind of it's kind of post-traumatic poverty disorder in one sense, right? It's kind of like you are now in this. I mean, I also kind of know what that mode is like, because obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but yeah, I was unfortunately in extreme desperation at various points. That's part of why Neofood was made. It was basically working homeless in Hawaii under U.S. Colonial capitalist occupation. That's partially what the game Neofood 1 is about, certainly, and so trying to just survive that and help people who are also trying to survive that in the ghettos of downtown Honolulu that the tour buses avoid for reasons of perpetuating the tourism industrial complex and the military occupation for the Indo-Pacific Command. Anyway, long story short, so then it's really like it's something that, but it's like you kind of said like how even though you're not necessarily raised, but I think it's actually that's the important point, and I feel like that's something I wanted to say in Neofield as well, which is that there's a character, Princess Sybil Clinton Bush, who is like the daughter of the the head of the Clinton Bush multi-planetary conglomerate. Like he has like $2 quadrillion worth of last-hold gold from a Kuiper Belt comet. He's the director of the CIA plus the monarch of post-democracy or mask off, we're not democratic for real, neo-feudal America and the world ultimately. He's like, and he's also the military commander. And so she's the daughter of like the richest man in the solar system, right? And so, but she also has no father, right? Because he doesn't, right? Like Elon, like he uses his child, unfortunately, kind of like a human shield, basically. Elon's trans daughter definitely has things to say about him. And Bertha Sybil is kind of like Elon Musk's trans daughter. She was written before we knew. She was dunking on Elon successfully and being more funny than him at the same time.
I mean, not hard.
and yeah, not hard. Yeah, not hard. But he's very upset. That's why he has to combat. He has his own internal fight, which is like, he couldn't control what his own children turned out to be. But actually that's part of the thing, which is that even those who have the billions, right? They themselves are broken by the fact that they have so much that they have never, been asked to respect nature or definitely respect their fellow human beings to maintain that status, which there are in a systemic, a global class system, right? Of a global neo-colonial and capitalist system. And if they betray that, they in one sense they kind of, not that they can't, but like individually they can't maneuver out of that, and so they're kind of locked into it. And so obviously just doubling and tripling and quadrupling down into that. Now some of them try to go rogue, and like I think Jeff Bezos' former partner, is trying to donate a lot of it, but individually they can't necessarily change that system. But both the ultra rich children, right, who are kind of have these spoiled brats who don't really have they were not raised to be full, complete human beings, and they have that sickness, the sick mind, and they don't care to raise their own children. Like I've been around these people, and they're like, a lot of the children really hate their parents, despite the parents having all the money they could possibly and all the resources ever, and that causes like a knock-on effect. But there's also obviously, but the existence of the billionaire creates the impoverishment, right? They're kind of two sides of the same coin, right? So the impoverished people of the ghettos and of the slums and of just not those without enough is a part of that system. And so those people can also get it in their head and have it installed inside of, they can get the post-traumatic capitalist poverty disorder, where they all they want to do is like fill their pockets, and when they do, they don't know what exactly to do other than to continue to seek more and more and more. Yeah. Why we call that I know you're talking about the we don't want to say the word that starts with W, but just like I'll just say this one last story. But there's a Hawaiian equivalent, which is the or one of many, which is I think I might have told it to you before, but it's the myth of the flying taro, and the one basically the greedy chief, right? And the kalo. This is about like one of our interventions, right? And there's a whole host of these to control, like in basically functionally, collectivist, abundance-based, healed mind society for the most part. But we understand that people can become soul sick or mind sick, right? I think Amy Cesar talked about the sickness of the soul that is before colonialism. And anyway, so the one chief that decides, what, I am not going to steward. I'm not going to live by pono, I'm not going to do my kuleana, my responsibility, and which is also, it's a responsibility and a right, right? It's about a mutual respect, as opposed to an unbalanced plunder for one-sided taking, right? I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to manage the resources for the good of the collective. I'm going to hold some more of it than I need for myself. I'm going to be greedy. I'm going to try to be a capitalist, right? Basically. And if he tries to do that, the responsibility of the kalo, which is the elder brother of humanity, or the Kanaka Maoli or Native Hawaiians or just people, the kalo is in the story. It's kind of like it's a mythical tale that's interesting for children, but it's also to explain the value and also the systemic methods of economic. It could be described partially as in the Western Marxist terms as like a general strike, because or the workers refusing labor. It's partially that, because the kalo, when the ali'i, the chief, becomes selfish and hoarding and not stewarding, and becomes like a CEO, wannabe CEO king, then the responsibility of the kalo and also the people is to exit the area. So they basically kalo fly to the next patch, and then they fly to the next patch, which is a thing that we would practice historically. If one of these valleys, right, out of the 99 valleys on the island or 50 valleys, gets a mind sick leader, and he's clustering together others that are following him, right? He's breaking other people around him, right? He's sickening others, kind of like so much I don't know, pandemic virus, spreading to the other people, and then he's taking the resources to feed an army that's fighting to take over other neighboring valleys, right? That's what this has happened before. And there's a TV show, Chief of War. It's kind of like if it gets really out of hand, it can turn into that. But usually that's not what Hawaii and other indigenous Austronesian Pacific cultures were like. Mostly it was pretty even keel. But if it does, then the workers need to huki pahana, which means they need to pahana until pono or justice is restored. You have to leave that area. You don't work that land, which means the land, right? The kalo is not going to the agricultural products and the fish. The fish is not going to be fished, right? The food is not going to be harvested. It's not going to work without the workers. Then, and actually, that's where the word mana comes in. It's funny because I was telling people who are really into tabletop RPGs and Shadowrun, the mana, sometimes depending on where you're from, but the mana is actually a Pacific Islander word that means partially it can mean the force of power that that allows you to do great feats, but it also means, right, like our friend Naftali Faulkner, one time we're talking about something and I accidentally used I was crediting something not quite right, and he's like, I put a lot of mana in that, so when you respect the mana that I put into that, and please, like, you try to credit this the correctly. Or what we talk about in the trade center, let us not consider the dollar value of this 1 pound of avocados. Don't consider the dollar value of because we do trades like how much a tree trimming around your house is worth. We trade skills and we trade we grow sweet potatoes and all kinds of stuff, coconuts. Don't consider how much 5 pounds of coconuts is worth in dollars. Consider the mana. What is that? That's it's also the labor of in a left like socialist description. It's also the labor value. Like we put energy and time. Like when you make or like beadwork, right, or art, it's mana is invested into it. And if we don't invest mana, right, then we don't then the Ali, right, who is the leader that's supposed to be redistributing according to need, right, not hoarding, right, because he has some kind of mind sickness. He should be mind healed and he should be helping to coordinate the redistribution of the food, the water, the medicine, and everything that the land gives, right? And if he doesn't, then you must withhold your mana. You have to withhold your labor value, exit the region, and so that's actually the real power. It's kind of funny because I'm not saying that you're bad if you use mana cast fireballs in Magic the Gathering or something, but it's kind of funny that it's like magic power is the ability to like blow things and burn things in Western conceptions, but the mana actually literally means like the actual power in the real world. That is what nature gives and what humans labor and work is capable of producing. That's actually what it means. And to withhold that is the way that you treat, partially the way that you treat the minority of the population that has come down with this sickness of the mind that believes that they need everyone else's energy and life force. And anyway, I'm going too long, so I'll throw it back to you.
No, yeah, that's interesting. No, I mean, I agree. Like that's also part of it is sort of the workers have a responsibility in this relationship where if you are going to have leaders, like if you're going to create a system where you're going to have somebody that you've said, okay, either through election or birth or whatever, this person, we're putting the authority of mass decision making to them, you are also required to not go along with it if you don't agree with it. Like that's your job. You can't just be like, oh well, government said I had to. It's like, no. And I think a lot of it does come down to like we've been trained to dislike inconvenience. One of the things I keep laughing at is when I see like people being like, oh, why can't we be, or it's like in the States being like, why can't we be like France? And I was like, because they don't see that as inconvenient. Like or they see it as inconvenience that's worth it. I guess, is maybe if you want to split hairs. But like, but I think at the end of the day, no, they don't see it as something inconvenient to do because they're like, well, we have to do it. They more get irritated that they had to do it. But I was like, that is how you have, like, you're right, like that's how you have a strong society, is you have a invested like worker class, if you want to put it that way. And invested means you don't just show up, do your work, and get your paycheck. You are responsible for being part of the system. It's like I've had this conversation a couple of times with people about like, do I think that the clerks at the insurance company are as guilty as the CEO? No, not as guilty, but they're guilty. They're perpetuating this system. They're choosing, and we say things and we have justifications like, well, they need to get paid. It's just a job. I was like, that's how you justify anything. That's just, they were just following orders of the working class, right? Where, well, I was just doing, like, well, fine, maybe then we need to make that illegal. Like, you don't get to just be a cog in that system. And I think that was the big thing about, I think what maybe really excited and terrified people about the indigenous, especially the Turtle Island indigenous ways of being, is that a democracy meant everyone's involved, not just the ruling class. And like, that's where we get the Enlightenment from. The Savage Papers, as they're called, the interviews with all these different, not just chiefs, just like people who were in these communities, these guys from like France and England and Portugal and stuff, would come and just listen to them and write down everything they were saying and then put it in these big copied papers and send them off. And that's what the Enlightenment came from. Everything that the American system is built on is stolen tools from the Confederacy, the indigenous Confederacy that was up here. And they figured out, I think they figured out that, we can take that aspect that was still present in the Roman Greek societies, which was that we in charge, we get to make all the decisions. Working class, you don't get to make any decisions, and you can't make any decisions actually. And so that's, it was this training, like you said, that went into building the perfect slave class. And that's what they've done here. That's essentially what capitalism did here. It trained up a slave class. We don't call it that, but that's what we are. We're wages, right? Like you go into work. I think about things when people are like, "Are you against that?" They're like, "No. That's just like we're contributing to the system." And I was like, "Do you ever think it's weird that you have to drive to work? Like, why aren't you working within walking distance? Like, why do you have to commute into the city? What exactly is that about? Like, what work is there that needs to be done there that can't be done in a small office in where you live?" Does anyone think it's weird that like companies are allowed to tell you what to wear, but they won't pay for it? Or that you're required to have certain equipment and they won't pay for it? And I'm just like, there's so many things that I think the working class has had foisted onto them that is the responsibility of, I guess I want to call them the business class or the managerial class. No, the owner class. Sorry, I need to get like brushed up on my modern terms because I feel like things are changing now. We have all these different like better like distinctions, but yeah, that worker class has, they take on a huge disproportionate burden before they even start doing labor. And the fact that they're like just shrug their shoulders and are like, that's just the way it is. And I'm just like, I think people need to start asking why. Why is that the way it is? Why are companies allowed to like dictate what you wear but aren't required to pay for your uniform? Why are they allowed to require you to have special equipment but not pay for that? Or why do we commute? Somebody needs to explain to me why commuting was ever necessary. I swear it makes no sense to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I definitely have. I've discussed that on in various sites, but and actually recently I was just uh, I was like looking at some news reports about there's going forward, obviously because of current events, because of people of sick mind who would like to continue the system going. They have started wars in Central and West Asia, and that's going to cause. It's not even actually hit yet. The sudden lack of like
Yeah.
20% of the world's oil and natural gas, amongst other things, and that's going to cause 2020 the COVID era, uh, not necessarily in the sense of sickness, but in the sense of the amount of going to offices, right? The thing is, we do know what it's like, right? We do know what it's like when you have a sudden lack of or absence of commuting, and we know it's possible, right? Actually, disabled people do a lot better when there's remote options for school and for work. Actually, the fish came back into the streams in Los Angeles. The skies above New York were blue, right? There's suddenly the carbon emissions of the planet
Exactly.
Earth dropped, right?
Yeah.
We know actually what happens because we already went through a world without unnecessary commuting, which was always unnecessary. It's necessary if you want to keep playing Ponzi real estate schemes, which is where 85% of all, capitalist central bank produced loans go straight into, which is commercial
Yeah.
investment and an overpriced Ponzi scheme, ever escalating housing prices for landlords. And so that's what it's for. It's kind of like, what is your office work for? Is to justify why a handful of people can keep on ruining the world for basically nothing
Yeah.
except, right? And so there's also a reason why you need to commute, because you don't. I mean, that actually in the come back to the games just a little bit. That the game where I was Game Workers Unite. I remember listening to one of their a podcast where they were talking some of the union organizers, speaking of workers and at the intersection of games and also real estate and the commuting phenomenon, which is that, like, they were saying one of the top asks of the game workers, even beyond necessarily just the wages, the wages, sexual harassment inside of workplaces was like, that's terrible. Part of the reason why people realized, right, that oh my gosh, this is such a not right. It's like the Margaret Thatcherite mind prison, which is like, this is the only way possible. And then suddenly people realize, I could not get sexually harassed. I didn't have to spend 3 hours driving through intolerable traffic and getting sick and wasting my life energy in this massive car, and also polluting the earth and destroying it, right, unnecessarily. Driving so I could sit in front of a screen I could have sat in front of at home. And then people realized, the game workers said, like, after the, especially like in 2022 2023, like, we demand like telework or remote option. That's one of the core demands for all these host of reasons, because it's cheaper for us, it's better for the environment. It's just ridiculous. We're all game workers who make software, for crying out loud, right? So it's and so
Yeah.
and right, so it's like and so for us, well, here at Service Spook Cooperative, we're I mean, luckily we have many lucky privileges and honors. We're Holly and I were lucky that we were able to do what we're still doing it after 10 years. I was just talking to Dave, like, he's been in business for 20. We've been in it for 10. But most small businesses fail after 5. So we're
Yep.
knock on wood and fingers crossed. But I mean, one positive about what we've been able to do. I mean, of course, like, if you want to go and try to do it the other route, that's I can't say that what we do is going to work everywhere, but like we have been able to obviously choose to work. Like, we have been remote working for since Silver Spook Games started in 2017, even before the pandemic started, and like everyone was like, oh, you're gonna start. We heard other people were gonna work from home or school from home or what not, and we were like, oh, you're all gonna do what we've already been doing. And
Yeah.
that's great, because then we'll see more normal. But also it's great because I think Holly and I have always been like hoping that, I mean, not that there's some things you have to do in person. Like, if you're going to restore nature, if you're going to do some agriculture, if you're going to make certain kinds of products, if you're going to have certain kind of meetups, there's certain things you have to do, in person at certain sites. If you're building a bridge, I don't know, things like that. But then, like, things like, if you're managing numbers, see your system analytics, programming, writing, obviously making video games, which is a lot of what are these office buildings for, right? It's just these right. That's what they're to store people, and it's all to the skyscrapers are like the neo feudal pomp and circumstance. They're to train the workers' brains that this person in the corner office is more important than you. That's really what it's for. It's not for productivity. They actually discovered, right? There was productivity losses in offices because of distractions and actually the sexual harassment and just unnecessary the pomp and circumstance of like, here is Mr. Corner Office varsity jacket daddy was the president boy, Mr. Nepotism, right? That stuff actually lowers productivity, but it maximizes the power and the mental mindshare of capitalism and the whole the modern court, the modern Versailles court, the modern right the modern plantation or the modern the modern structure of capitalism, which is the that kind of office rat race. Certainly for people that live in places like the U.S. and Canada, that's like where and it's not really about productivity. If you really wanted productivity, we would have had remote work, but it's actually so in that's another place where capitalism is actually sacrificing people's ability, to produce their mana, their actual value of what they could be doing. Like actually, like you said, like making art, making games that they care about, and it's all just being sacrificed. And but yeah, I hope that one day more people figure out that like we can do a lot of like maybe not like every single day you're always in your house because you got to go out and do certain experience the world and meet with people. And we do like various, like I said, we do the Agua meetup once a week, but like this every single day you driving hours burning gas just so that we could keep the global fossil fuel imperialism going, and and keep the world stuck in that mode, and just justifying astronomical unnecessary values of giant steel and concrete and polarized glass skyscrapers is just it's just not good. It's not good. It's not it's bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think also a big part of it is, from the people that I've talked to. So like my family's run a custom brokerage business for I think like 100 years since there was a border. And I've heard the way they talk about their workers. They don't trust them. That's a big part of it. It's about like this false belief that if you the boss are in the room with them, then somehow they're going to do better work. And it's like, but that's not true. And I think that's also why it's like, well, it means also, what are you looking at? What are you deciding they're doing good work on? Like, do they have a quota where they know what they have to meet and it's an easy deliverable to check? If you have that, then they can not be in the room with you. They don't have to be in the room with you. And so like there's also a big part of that. And I really do hear that. I think that's like the number one real fear is that like, well, they'll be screwing around and stuff. I'm like, well, then fire them. Like that's the other thing too. It's like, look, if somebody's really not doing their job, I at no point in any of my things have said that, oh no, once you hire somebody, you have to keep them forever. I would never say that. I've had terrible employees where I was like, oh thank God I'm firing you. So choosing to not want to work with somebody, that should be based on something tangible, like they're hurtful to other people in the group, they're not pulling their weight, or they're just a terrible person to try and work with. Like, those are legitimate reasons to let somebody go, and none of it has to do with trust. Like, you should just, if you hired somebody, you should trust that you made a good decision, and if you turns out that you made a bad decision, you can end that decision. And this idea that you somehow need to be this authority, this panopticon, watching people all the time is like, I mean, it just feeds into, it's the kind of like abuse that you accept in the home, you'll accept in the workplace, you'll accept by your government. And that's why it is like that, right? Like, it's really about making sure that people, even if they don't feel comfortable with it, at least accept that they're going to be watched and they're going to be controlled like that. And I think that's the big thing. Like, this society that these people in charge need to let go of trying to control everybody. It feels very clenched. Like when I look at sort of like the Western imperialist mode of interacting with the working class, it's so like fingers digging into palms, hands on the reins. Like they can't let go, and it's like you need to let go. You need to let people, you don't need to have somebody standing at a cash desk the whole day. Give them a chair. Let go. You don't need to have your eyes on your workers 24/7, watching their keystrokes, seeing if they're really doing anything. You need to let go. Like we need to move from sort of a performance-based society where it's the performance of labor, because that's what it feels like. Feels like I'm in a fucking ballet sometimes, where it's like everybody's got their part, they're all doing it in sync, and the manager comes out and it's like, what a beautiful performance. Meanwhile, people are like scratching lotto tickets underneath or playing games on their phones. Nobody's getting nothing done. It's all a fucking dance. And just the way that we've normalized a performance of labor as the way to do it. Like my indigenous brain sees this and it was like, why are all you fucking around? Like there's real work to be done. There's fields to like harvest. There's like beadwork to be done. There's like land that needs healing. Like that's real work we could be putting in, not this like, yeah, I'm doing my TPS reports. Look how many TPS reports I'm doing. So it's really interesting to me how we hear this sort of like Western work ethic being touted as somehow the best, but at the end of the day, it's all about just pretending and showing in theater, not actual, like you said, mana. There's no real like actual work. There's no real investment. It's just sucking your soul because you're play acting the whole time. So yeah, man, I really hate this system. This is terrible.
Yeah. No, I think it's, because it does, because it's kind of like the billions hurts both the ultra rich and then the impoverished, and it's like the performance of work, great, I can do very little and I get paid a whole lot to do this, cushy job where I pretend to work the whole time. But it's also like it also hurts the BS job haver, like the David Graeber sense of the BS job. Bullshit job, like it also hurts the soul of the person that is doing meaningless nothingness. Or that's part of the point of Office Space, which is like, why am I doing this, right? And it's like, well, you're doing that because you need to be part of some kind of labor aristocracy that justifies a global imperial capitalist system of sucking everyone else's mana out, 90% of the world, and sticking it inside of Wall Street, Toronto Stock Exchange, London Stock Exchange, and then you get to go drive to your job so you can stick a bunch of money into this the giant skyscraper pyramid schemes that nobody is even living in. In Honolulu, it's like 80% unoccupied. Yeah. Just literal like bank vaults made out of concrete being wasted. And so it's and it does, because you kind of feel this inherent hole, void in the soul. And I'm like, and as a worker in that, and I think it's it will be, it's it's healing to the workers to actually. I think that's one thing people felt was, wow, I'm actually getting more actual work done, like in the sense of what we're talking about, like getting work that I'm producing something of value that people want. Like, I mean, because like obviously making a video game is something that you do in front of a computer screen, but it's like it's something you're producing, some kind of art or some kind of entertainment, something that you care about. And I think that's where a lot of indie I think that's also part of why I think a lot of there's a whole host of like indie game devs that are former big corporate game devs or tech workers or office workers of some kind that are like, I had to quit that soulless dystopian capitalist office job and go like farm out somewhere and just work remotely. I work on my indie game, and that's basically what we're doing. We're just like farming indigenously and we're building the system and also making video games with utilizing the 21st century tools like the internet that we have, because people like a lot of game devs and among as a subclass of workers and also a subclass of like tech workers, like want to produce something that expresses something that they care about, that is of it's they put their mana into it, and then and their energy, their labor, and their life, and their experiences, and like their philosophical, intellectual, emotional messages they want to communicate that they don't see having been communicated yet, and also make things that are fun for people to play, and that's why I think it's obviously we're seeing a kind of collapse of the capitalist tech bro AAA game world that's unable to sustain its values, just kind of going like full into this the Gen AI nightmare.
Oh god.
Torment Nexus, Silver Spook, and Neophyte 2 a lot of deals with some of that deep dark hellscape you could arrive at if you keep going down that Gen AI black hole. But it's kind of like, and so and like that, and it's literally destroying people's capacity to get like RAM, basic things like get computers, because of it's all being sucked into that data center, like Palantir, OpenAI, destroying creativity, art, and all, like eating the human soul with this misappropriation of the HAL 9000 and all the Terminator science fiction stories into anyway. So like I was talking about with Dave towards the end of some of that. We went off on some rants on that. But I think that is kind of like that is part of in one sense like the OpenAI eating all human creativity, and Sam Altman going, humans use more energy and resources to train themselves than a data center, and so we don't need you, right? That I made a game called Terminus Market that literally that happens, right, in 2013 or so, and I was like, but that kind of for what I watched Elon and Peter Thiel in that time, because I was going to go be an AI. I was going to go study artificial intelligence and cognitive computing in 2009. It meant something very different. I was going to study like neural networks and what that meant, and I saw people like Thiel and Musk and Mencius Moldbug and all these neo monarchists, Return of Kings people, talking about these ideas, and that was the crux of Silicon Valley and a lot of California's tech Palo Alto leadership. And that's what I was like, you know what, I'm gonna make a game about you. It's called Terminus Market, and I was like, this was always, to me, it was like not necessarily like inevitable, but this was the direction things were going to gravitate in towards as technology got better, as artificial intelligence improved, but like as software improved, but not to the point of actually producing like the actual HAL 9000 or actual Skynet or actual some kind of singularity savior, but just producing like bigger and bigger systems of data that can optimize the capitalist churn at a higher and higher rate, and the virtualization you're talking about, like the bullshit jobs, right? And so computer accelerated bullshitization, which is the virtualized Wall Street economy, and that, which is kind of where we're arriving at with this $20 trillion plus Gen AI, crypto, big tech, and a lot of the game companies all wrapped up and sucked into that like kind of black hole, plus the fossil fuel entities, right? Like this is the huge what EA Games bought out by rich Gulf states and all that, that like that confluence to me like felt ultimately inevitable. And that also, that's where like Neophyte also kind of comes from, is what happens if, who is the final techno king that runs this AI powered robot military with no human consumers left to consume anything, because they don't care about the humans that they're all causing to starve. And so anyway, I noticed I threw out so many words and ideas all at once. I apologize, but long story short, what I wanted to say was that like I think that is running. The good news is not just to make everybody doom around, but that is really running its course, and that the people that are escaping that at a higher, kind of like what I said, right? It's kind of like the sprouts of the new world, which is also the old world, which is like the Silk Road, the 90 global majority, right? The 90% of healed human civilizations that were not run by the mind sick forces, is like coming back. The harder that dystopian cyberpunk direction accelerates, the more people flee it, right? And just try to, I'm out of here, right? And
right?
Yeah. So, I'll stop.
Yeah, no, it kills itself. It literally is the Ouroboros. Like it eats its own tail, and we're seeing that right now. And that's why I say we're in dead capitalism, because now what we're starting to see is these organs are consuming themselves. Like, okay, one of the things I think, not that I think your audience freaks out about this, but I do find the sort of general population, the worker class, I think they have a really gross misunderstanding of um, what empire collapse looks like for the average person. Because remember, like, you think about all the history books, like all of them focus on the elite, who they're the ones that had the most upturn, and they died, they were killed, they had to escape, they went and founded small villages in France. There is a village in France that is run by one of the families that escaped the fall of Rome, and they still run it to this day. So, like these people, yeah, these people have a huge upturn. The average worker will not notice. And they don't want you to know that. They don't want you to know that your life, Joe and Jane Schmo in middle America, is really not going to change very much when the system collapses, because the system is not in charge, really. People are in charge. So, we think about, like, we even saw what happened when the system collapses. We saw it in COVID. Like, it's not great, obviously, but the average person is not like, their life actually gets better. The average person's life is going to get better. And if there hadn't been a deadly virus, like if let's say COVID had happened and there was no sickness, and it happened because capitalism collapsed, the Wall Street collapse, the car fuel system collapses, um, that would basically have been your everyday. Is that sort of, because the government would have just stepped in and started like rationing fuel out for like important things like food and water and stuff like that. So you're not going to be getting these, like, sorry, your Labubus don't get to be shipped into the city anymore right now. We're focusing on important things. But you don't have to worry about that. That's the government's job. The internet is still going to be around. If the internet collapsed, I guarantee you within a week, a new one would be up. I think people need to really, like, average person, if you rent an apartment, if you barely afford your house, your life is going to get better. And if you're homeless, your life is going to get immensely better, because now all of a sudden these resources that were being pumped into things like the industrial car system is going to be sitting there useless, because we can't use them anymore. We don't need these giant roads. We don't need these cars. So these taxes have to go towards something. They're probably going to go towards housing. Also, think of the number of parking lots that suddenly are going to become incredibly cheap, because nobody's going to want them, because you can't. And I think that would mean a lot of building projects in cities and that kind of thing. Not that I'm really not somebody who thinks that, like, building more houses is what's needed, because like you said, like, there are entire, like, New York City alone, I am sure the majority of the buildings around Central Park are empty. I feel like I could guarantee that like those buildings are 90% empty. So there's housing already. And yeah, I just feel like when the sort of capitalist empire does collapse, does finally go away, our lives are going to get so much better. And that's and I wish more people would talk about that when they're talking about what post-capitalism looks like, because I think they keep, at least from my experience, there's this. So I'm kind of into the indigenous futurism sphere a little bit. I'm kind of like on the edge. None of the writers will talk to me. But like, a lot of the stuff that I read in indigenous futurisms is like super far in the future. And a lot of it I think is like very evocative of sort of like A Thousand Leagues Under the Sea, Jules Verne, kind of, we're being a little bit ridiculous. We're not really thinking about like what would society actually look like. We're being fantastical. And my stuff, I like to think about like, what is it actually going to look like? And I think there are a lot of really interesting people working in kind of that realm of futurism's utopianism. And I would like to see more of that going forward when we start talking about the future. Because I feel like a lot of these futurist stories, I was like, I can't see myself there. It's so far away from what I'm living right now.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, just to bring it back to that, I mean, because Hill Agency was, as I said at the beginning, like a game that definitely inspired me a lot. I know we've talked about it before, several times, but it was definitely like a more indigenous people living in a near future, and it's a very positive. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's a very much better situation than is at present, and it's definitely a post-colonial situation, and then that's partially what inspired the Neo Future 2 world, where it's kind of, which is, I'm trying to do indigenous futurism in the way that you said, which is what would that what would a technologically advanced non-capitalist, post-capitalist, or indigenous civilization look like? And that's like what the major like focal point, like, and one major difference between Neo 1 and 2 is that the first one is mostly the bottom to the top of this is the problems that we currently exist under, from the ghettos to the highest elite palaces in the floating sparkling cities. But in the Neo 2, you get to actually visit. It takes a little bit. The first part of the game is just kind of traditional cyberpunk, for it's kind of like the sugar for the medicine that's going to come later. Although not to say, there's lots of critiques of capitalist system within the kind of dystopian cyberpunk, more New York like, current New York like place, that is where you start at with all the neon but the homelessness everywhere, similar to Neo 1. But then and then you escape from New York, and you take a long journey across the horizontally, and you arrive in a new place, where there is no homelessness there, like you were saying, where all houses are for, there's a head of a country that recently said, houses are for living and not for making money. And it's all houses are for living and not for making money. Everyone is housed unconditionally. Everyone has infinite, free food, free energy, because there's like sentient machines in this world. And it's also not on Earth. There's refugee aliens from imperialist places that are housed and taken care of and given all the and it's there's actually a green scraper hospital in this indigenous socialist civilization, of these people I was talking about earlier. They're called the Venurans, and they have the people who have left the capitalist, the galactic West, they called the utopian, the galactic rules based order. People who have left this capitalist Western world, they are first brought to these like green scraper rehabilitation centers, right? But it's not, right. It's kind of like, it's not just the billionaire. This is just like average people, right? So the main character, he has to go, and like when he first gets there, he like freaks out and starts attacking, because he's like programmed to hate communists. He's programmed to hate socialists, right, by his military that designed him to do that and go kill people in space Vietnam and space, Korea. And he's like, oh, I gotta put down all you commie Venus bugs, and then they're like, we're just trying to help you and alleviate your poverty, which you suffered. And he's like, no, you don't understand. And so he passes out. When he wakes back up, they're like, don't worry, we're gonna get you to a hospital on this ambulance. And he's like, no, don't call it. Don't put me in the ambulance. I can't afford it. And they're like, all healthcare is free in this indigenous social civilization. And then he has like a mass. That knocks him back out. He's like, no, that's impossible. He passes out.
No, that can't be.
That's not true. Healthcare is expensive. Yeah.
Actually, that was so part of my path now moving into MFA is kind of giving me an opportunity to try exploring some of these ideas that I wanted to do in video games and other places. And one of the things that I've wanted to try is, thinking about what would it be like to immigrate to the future? Like, because you think about it, like the future is going to be a different culture. And like I love that idea that I think, also you're like hearing about what you were going to do in Neo Feud, because I've been hearing about it for the entire time we've been friends.
Yeah.
But yeah, thinking about like, how would somebody immigrate into that sort of post-capitalist, post-colonial space, especially like if you've really bought in or really been traumatized by that. And maybe I think if we can like play with that and do like, you know, because I thought about like, what about having literal immigration like to the future? Like you're gonna have to come through and you're gonna have to like take a test to get in, and you're gonna have to like explore this space. And you know, what is it like when you think about like what is it for a newcomer to come to your country? So like what is it like for somebody to come to Canada? Like what's the process that they have to go through to sort of like be, I guess, like dipped in the culture that they're going to be living in, so that they're at least like not, you know, don't have a heart attack because they're like, oh my God, the skirts are so short. Or like, oh my God, like you guys don't have entirely free healthcare. I've heard from many a Nordic person that our healthcare is not that great.
um, yeah, no, yeah, it's definitely not. And that's in the U.S. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's I mean that sounds like a really cool idea. That's kind of partial. I mean, partially that is what is happening because it's like what do you call it? Alternate temporalities. I can't remember what the term is, but it's well, I mean, for all intents and purposes, right? The other side, when you cross that, when you leave country A and you enter the second country, you are traveling really through time in that sense, right? So and it does because yeah, I mean that's one thing I was thinking about a lot, and then partially it's actually autobiographical because like I left Honolulu, which is like the built up city area of Hawaii. It's the more deeply American and the colonial capitalist in the you know that and it's a military, you know, it's just deeply entrenched in that. And when I came to like the less colonially less occupied in a sense of like the way people actually live and the way the system actually works. It's not nowhere is fully out of it, but it's more governed by alternate ways. And it was a shock to me too. I was like, what? There's like public parks that are like functional. There's like I remember like when I first got this island that I'm on, which is not the most populous island with Honolulu and Pearl Harbor on it. And I was like, there's like public parks. There's toilet paper and all the bathrooms are nice. That's the first thing I noted. All the bathrooms are nice. Toilet paper. All the roads are paved. Like, cause there's like potholes and things are falling apart. Infrastructure where I'm from in the ghettos of Honolulu. It's like the Camden, New Jersey, or Oakland, or you know the worst part of you know just the poor side of the city, which is part of what I call it Coastlandia. But it's kind of like it's the all cities that are not carefully regulated by some kind of right centralized stewarding as opposed to accumulating government. And so I'm just used to like there being cities where there's just like, or there's just areas, most of it except for rich areas, that are just kind of falling apart, poor public services, and like there's some homeless people, but like there a lot of people that are on where we are, it's more by their own kind of like weird life choice, or you know they have some a lot of them are actually Americans that are just like they don't actually need to be there. They're kind of more trustafarians than homeless in the way of I can't live because I work with working homeless and with poor because of the poverty, and it's a different thing. Anyway, so long story short is that it was kind of a shock when I came here, and also when I was talking to our our comrades around the world from non-Western capitalist countries, and the way they're describing obviously one of our friends Luna who's a comrade who we work on Decolonators together. It's about the history of Vietnam and their struggle against colonialism and imperialism and capitalist invaders, and also but like look, they're talking about how they live there, and it's like, oh yeah, no, well, we don't pay such exorbitant prices for health. We don't pay for housing, and like they dealt with even the COVID pandemic like way better than a lot of people were treated. A lot essential workers had to go to work. The like billionaires made tons of money. Everyone else kind of got screwed. It was really chaotic, and I was like kind of like shocked. It did seem like unbelievable. The main character is kind of having like in Near Future when he does that migration, it's like I don't believe this. Like it's kind of like Neo in the Matrix, right? It's like I don't believe this is possible. He's like he's basically like he's going into literal shock, and that's basically what knocks him out. Is like he cannot process that it's possible because he's been told and he's been living through a world where it is not possible to have certain people having it all, and life is just everyone else trying to struggle by. And so and so there's like so actually part of that, the other civilization. So I was like, what is it like to be on the other side of that? And it's like, because it's kind of like there's like an elder, in this case it's like there's an elder civilization, which is, indigenous civilizations are thousands and tens of thousands, 2, 3, 5,000 or years older. America is what, 250 years. The Europe and these countries in Europe, they're very young relatively, and they're minority. And so the elder civilizations like have their role is viewed more as like they are parents of other younger civilizations, right? And so like they don't, like, a parent doesn't want to just like go to war with your child necessarily. I mean, metaphorically, yes, if your kid locks himself in the room, you're gonna, but like,
I mean,
but it's kind of like you they say things like, I mean, there's a line where it's like the main character is like, he's like a replicant robot created to like fight the wars of his colonial capitalist space masters, and he's all like, why don't you just blow all these utopians up already? Just defeat them militarily, because you can. Like, you have warp technology. You're like 26 dimensional beings of light. Like you are treating them too nicely. Like because he's like upset. Like, why don't you just fix the problems of this kind of capitalist world? And they're like, well, that like we and the response is it's kind of like I was trying to figure out like what exactly would that be like, and it's kind of like if you see a child, right, that is like struggling with something, right, like struggling with math. Like, obviously you can do we got a teacher. You can do a few different things, right? You can immediately jump in and tell them the answer, and like it would stop their struggling, and that's not necessarily like wrong. And or maybe you could tell them to take a break. Maybe you could tell them, no, you got to keep struggling, right? Or you got to just be hard and tough love about it, or you got to be tough about it. It's making them make them stronger. But and that's why I was like, how am I gonna make these? Because these are kind of like these are extremely advanced people, and they're having to deal with these other, younger race that is like they view them as the younger misguided race, unhealed descendants of the Star Spangled Roman trauma, and so it's kind of like they're trying to guide them. If they give them too much all at once, because partially it's like if we give you everything, right, then you will not grow and learn to stand on your own 2 feet. So we will assist you, but you need to also learn to deal with your own internal problems. Kind of what we're saying. Whereas if everybody simultaneously said, you know what, we're done working for capitalist dickheads. You don't do any particular work, and we're all going to collectively resist. Now, so if one person does it, it's difficult, right? If everybody did it simultaneously, the billionaire class would be finished. If all of the colonies rose up, right, the global majority, the global north would also be finished. If they all said, that's it, we're not sending any more resources or factory products to any American or Europeans. That's it. That it would be done within a week, right? But so the complicating thing is like, how do you get so it's like, how do you like guide civilizations that are like, they're not, you don't want it because they don't want, like, the global majority and other non-Western, countries that are against the U.S. and that kind of imperial core, they don't want to just destroy every American, right? They want ultimately Americans and people suffering under those systems to heal and to, with a variety of tactics to deal with their own internal problems. And so so that's why they will assist you, and they assist the main character, but then it's ultimately but now you need to, it's kind of like the main, there's like this 1 billion-year-old indigenous alien that's like, you need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet, and I cannot be there for you forever. You need to ultimately, you and your fellow citizens, right, of your civilization needs to figure out how you're going to right your own internal problems. And I can help you. We can help you. We can assist you. We'll send you various resources. We'll take care of you, like, if you in this meantime. But you can't live like, I mean, I guess you can migrate, and that's one thing, and some people do that, but like ultimately you're going to have to learn to deal with your own internal problems. Because part of settler colonialism is because there's a version of Europe, right, in the 14, 15, 16, 17, 1800s, where they did right their internal tyrants and their internal ruler. Now, it didn't happen, but part of the reason why the world has settler colonialism is because they failed to correct their own internal injustices, like we were talking about this whole time, and for better or for worse, and they spread it to the rest of the planet over 500 years of colonialism. And that's another thing that this elder race is like, because you know, we want to limit like the spread. We want to take care of everyone, but we have to balance giving you exactly what you want right now, and with with your the learning and the growing that you need to do. And that was anyway. I'm going on for too long, and that's something that I think is I feel like that's something that a lot of the world is currently dealing with, and like I here in Hawaii we're definitely dealing with that too, with it, which is like yeah, how do we get from where we are into the future? I mean, in one sense, we are moving in that direction. Like we were just talking about,
Yeah.
like things are moving in that direction. Like now we can limit how much suffering, right, and how long it takes if we put more energy in. You put a little more energy into consciously choosing to we're gonna build a non-capitalist system, and we're gonna be more firm. Like like we said, I'm not just gonna show up and be a clerk for this crappy corporation. I'm gonna try to build something else. You know what I'm saying? So in that sense, there's a
Mhm.
lot. Anyway, yeah. So sorry, I'm just like spiraling in
Yeah,
too many
no,
directions.
no, I agree. And like you're right, like we are moving there. It's like it's gonna happen. Like I guess that's the other thing too. It's like I think, like I said, we've hit a tipping point. The the full complete decomposition of capitalism is inevitable at this point. And I think also you're right. It's like, the real question at this point isn't about like how do we end capitalism. It should be about how do we birth this new thing? Because I think that's also part of it, is that, collapse can be traumatic, but like it always births something new. I think a lot about this, the teachings of the controlled burns, right? There are forests that require a burn in order to be healthy. So this idea of like the old will be cleared out for the new, and there is trauma in that, and you're right. I think at this point it's mitigating harm. Like how can we lessen human suffering? How can we lessen sort of global life suffering? Like I think that's another thing that's happening now, is we're seeing a shift away from human centric thought into, all right, well, yes, I want to mitigate human suffering, but I also want to mitigate the suffering of the trees, the suffering of the animals and the fish in the water and in the sky and on the land, and the microbes and the insects. Like we're really starting to think of ourselves as just another person in this larger collective of non-human people and persons. And that I really hope in the future that when we say person, we don't necessarily just mean a human, that we ascribe personhood to all living things. Now, I think that can go really the wrong way. I don't know if you know about naturalists, not nudists, naturalists. They're they have a very like colonial idea of what nature is. So they also do reject sort of the way that capitalism destroys the planet and tears up native species and implants like very dangerous invasive species and whatnot that absolutely destroy the land. But they have this belief that like nature is separate from humans, and that all they need to do as humans is replace what was, like, basically fix the wound. So replace the native species, take out the invasive species, try to bring the land and the water back to what it was pre-colonial times, pre-industrial times, really, and then leave it. And it's like, well, that's not how indigenous people think, because it's a caretaking job. It's not, you don't just plant a tree. You are now responsible for the caretaking of that tree, especially if it's providing anything for you. Which I always say, like, if it's native to North America or the Americas in general, then it has a purpose. That's either food, medicine, material, or food for our food, or so. everything that we have on this continent is here for a reason, because this is, I would have said, the largest, probably the largest garden in the world. Like the entirety of Turtle Island was a maintained garden. It wasn't just, like when the stories of like the settlers coming and be like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. You can just reach out and grab food. You're like, yeah, somebody did that. Somebody worked really hard for many generations on that. And that's what that's what I think we need to return to, is thinking about the land as a garden rather than this sort of like beast that needs to be clubbed into submission, and that's everything. Like, I just, again, it comes back to that like holding that tension, that like clenching, very like it just, the entirety of the Western way of doing things, it just feels very clenched. I love, I don't know if you've read Braiding Sweetgrass, but I really love the story that she brings up about like Eve meeting Sky Woman, and how, the entire story of Eden and Eve is this very like, you have to beat the land into submission. Like, I have removed my gifts from you. You have to like claw them back. Whereas you have Sky Woman's story and the story of how the world was formed, and it's just this very beautiful reciprocal, I have seeds, you have land, we're going to put them together. Now we have stuff for everybody. Let's maintain this beautiful garden so there's always enough for everyone to eat. This really was the land of plenty. And I just, that's the thing. I think that's what I'm hoping for, is just this like collective unclenching. Like remove the stick from posterior and just chill. Like, this living does not need to be this hard. And I think that's part of the lie that they tell themselves, that the capitalist tells themselves, is that like life does have to be hard, because, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And again, it's, religion can also be a perpetuation of trauma that's been sort of formalized and sacrosanct. But yeah, I keep thinking, like, as a child, I always thought that the story of Adam and Eve just felt so at odds with my experience of nature. I guess that's also like comes from an entirely different ecological located society. Like, my people never really dealt with a desert like that. But we have people in Turtle Island who live in the desert, and they also don't have a story that involves, you know, pulling and pushing and clubbing and telling nature what to do. It's also a story of abundance and reciprocity. So it's this really old cultural hangover that I think we're really getting over. And I think capitalism was the natural progression of that idea that you have to force others to do things. And it just, also to me, it's so sad. It's like, it just, how awful of a life to live, where you have to feel like you have to force everybody to work with you, to do things for you, to do things with you. Like, I imagine that must be an immensely lonely way of experiencing the world. That this idea that, like, if I can't force you to be around me, and think about like how many relationships are based in that too, like romantic, friendships, parental, where it's like it's all about forcing, making, rather than like doing the hard work of building a relationship with others so they want to be around you. And I wonder if that does come down to, like, again, that lack wound of like, does the capitalist inherently see themselves as unlovable? Like, these kind of like, yeah, I get a little too like, let me analyze your life patterns.
um, yeah, no, because you brought up braiding sweetgrass. Yeah, I remember that was a real inspiration to real something I've pondered for some time. The Sky Woman and Eve story. Because I mean, I remember like hearing the Sky Woman. She came on a canoe, and the things that she brought, it's similar to like a lot of. I mean, it just echoes a lot of what has in the Pacific Islands. the obviously canoes and then arriving in new land, because everyone in the islands of the Pacific, came from somewhere else and brought their gifts, and then they built and worked with the land that was there to produce the a garden, right? And actually that's I remember thinking about that. Like I was thinking a lot about gardens, and I was thinking about that story comparing Eve versus Sky Woman, and the land that it gives freely, and the people are in this harmonious relationship with nature. And it's not, and work is there is some work as part of the relationship, but everything is plentiful. There's not like a need to struggle and to fight both nature but also each other, and then using each other to fight nature. It's part. It really is. Like if you go back to that, that even before the Romans, the Greek system, where it was difficult work, and so we the quote unquote free men don't do it. We have these other people that basically Afro-Asiatic, the people that now in the Levant and in North Africa, were a lot of people that were doing that hard toil and labor. And it's like, it's not that it's wrong. It's like that's because I was talking about going back all the way back to that Asia Pacific system of how we interact with nature, and how we some of this is geographical and climatological, or it's hard to do outpost system if you don't have certain kinds of running water. But you don't have to only do that. Like that's not the style of terrace agriculture that's 3,500 plus years old. That's not. There's other ways to manage, like you said, in the in less precipitation, like more deserted regions. There's other ways to not have to invest like grueling amount of a toil every day and still get back. And also because I was like studying in a lot of Asia, there's also a lot of deserted regions, and people are able to survive there, and they have survived there reasonably well for a long time, for thousands of years. And so but like in particular in that West, where it's like for whatever reason, like they were not able to figure out how to if you can't figure out how to work with nature to produce your needs in a reciprocal relationship, and it becomes very difficult. And then you say, well, what we're going to do is we're going to have certain classes of people, right? And these are going to be the working class, the slave class, the right, whatever, the serf, or somebody else that's not us. That they're going to do the hard, difficult labor, and we're going to, like you said, we're going to clench them with a chain around their neck, and we're going to force them to do this stuff. And the Spartans did like routinely massacred, on average they owned 7 slaves, and they routinely massacred them every year just as part of the threat, right, of forcing them to do this. And it's like, if you figured out how to now once you get into that habit over decades, centuries, millennia, then you're locked into a deeply unhealed, sick kind of civilization. But like whereas like in a lot of the rest of the world, a lot of people's humans like figure out how to navigate that in a way that their relationships with the land, right, we're not destructive, like you were saying. Like it's a garden. It's a 1,000+ year. North America is a 1,000+ year garden that's been tended. It's tended. It's not just out there. It's not like nature absent humans, which is also a Western perception. It's like the mes rensa, mes extensa kind of. There's the lower world that we have to subjugate and subdue, and like women and their bodies and non-white people that are our slaves, working class. Or the serfs, they all have to be subjugated and subdued like nature itself, and they're all beneath us, and they're all it. That's even inside of the language, and the pronouns, is part of that. Where in Hawaii, there's another similarity between Asia Pacific that I find interesting is also that there is no separate pronoun for he, she, and it, and there's definitely there's no elevated he as there is in the West, right? Where it's all in Hawaii, it's o, ya, and it's similar in Indonesia. And our Maori cousins have like basically the same word, and but also even in Vietnam and China and East Asia that we're talking about, they also have ta, which is a universal pronoun, and the way they talk about the way that we all kind of talk about the land and other human beings and the land, right? It's not to say that like we, as you're kind of saying earlier, we're all in a relational network, and like there's no particular people that are elevated be above and are subjugating and dominating those below. And that that's like a cosmology or paradigm of how reality is. That's that is really alien, right? That's part of, like, if somebody was to immigrate, that's something that's really difficult to even comprehend. People just trying to learn about how indigenous cultures work, because they're always asked, like, well, who's in charge? Like, who is dominating who? Like, who is the master? Who is the slave? Who is the boss and who is the employee? Right? Who is the and they have to know that who's on top and who's under them. Who is the colonizer? Who is the colonized? What country? Right? And everything has to be defined in those ways. But yeah, so like whereas
Yeah.
in nature, yeah, in the garden, if you think of it as a garden, then if you think of it as a garden that you are a part of and you're in it, then you're tending to it, as opposed to above it. I mean, above it from, like, that's a kind of, maybe, or like the naturalist is more like a kind of like more liberal perspective, maybe like feeling sorry about what has been done. And there's a more kind of like harder line. Well, the garden deserved to be destroyed because we needed to extract the oil and we needed to extract billions of dollars worth of corn or whatever monocrop we were growing there. And if you approach it that way, it's you're inevitably going to wreck the land that you're on, which is what they've done here in Hawaii, of course, under the U.S. occupation. It's destroyed much of the land.
I feel like the big thing is, so I feel like the misconception that people have when it comes to, like, indigenous hierarchy, it's not that we didn't have people in charge. Like, obviously we had people in charge. But the thing is, like, it was like the idea that it was flexible was, like, incomprehensible to them. Like, what do you mean this guy's only a chief when you guys are fighting these guys? What do you mean he gives up the role and somebody else takes over? Like, that idea that, like, you don't have one person who's always in this one job. And, like, that's the other thing too. It's like, I think about how monospecific Greek and Roman culture really set the world, like, they really set the world up for, like hyper specificity, where it's like, the only thing need to know how to do is this one job. And it's like, that's just not how it works for most cultures, not just indigenous, but, like, most cultures that have lived in relative, harmony with their environment have had flexible jobs, rotating jobs, seasonal jobs. Yeah, sure, maybe she's going to be queen for this season, but then she has to go work in the cannery because that's her job at that point. Like, that idea that you're not just, like, always an emperor, you are also sometimes a fisherman, like, blew their mind, and made them angry, because I think it exposed to them a fundamental truth that they've been ignoring in their own societies, which is, why does the king not have to go get his own supper? Like, why is the Pope always the Pope? Why doesn't he ever do any other job? Like, they start thinking about it, and then when you see cultures that are just doing that, I think it just really upset them. And that's something I'm not seeing quite the shift that I wish I was seeing right now, and people understanding that, like, jobs should be flexible, not in just the location, but also in, like, what are you doing? Like, do we really need to be doing these jobs all year? Like, I think about, like, canneries. Actually, specifically, I'm going to bring up canneries because I've always had this weird fascination with them. Why are they running all year? Like, if we move to a society that's more based in, like, seasonal, like, local, ecologically sound farming practices, then why would we have a cannery running all year? Shouldn't we only have it running, I mean, I know the answer. It's globalization. That's also part of the problem. It's like, it's so bizarre to me that we're like, oh, we're feeding the world. I'm like, no, the food is going and sitting in warehouses where people look at it. Like, that's what a grocery store really is. It's a warehouse where you get to look at it, and no, there's no way all that food is going to get eaten. by the people in that area. And I think a lot about the fact that, like, we don't need to be producing nearly this much. And a lot of this food does not need to go overseas because they also have their own amazingly efficient farms. Like, that's the other thing that, like, blows my mind when it comes to the globalization of food is, like, everybody is starving, and yet we're shipping these mountains of food to each other that nobody gets to eat. And I can see, like, how much, like, China alone could probably produce all the food for that entire continent. Like, their farms are that efficient. And, like, it's the same thing with North America. Like, I feel like if you did the math, the farms in Canada alone could probably feed the entire continent. Not just North America, but, like, the whole South. Like, that's how efficient our food production practices are. Like, we make so much, but of course, it's not all food, right? It's corn for cattle, it's corn for oil, and these kind of things. Like, it's a lot of monocrops. It's just every time I think about the post capitalism, all I keep thinking is, like, we are going to have so much stuff left over that because we're going to have a sudden halt to these global, like, shipping practices and stuff like that. Like, you're not going to be able to ship things by plane, and ship is going to become even more expensive, so you're going to be more careful about what you're shipping. So what's going to be next? Well, we'll probably see a revitalization of the rails within the Americas. I don't Probably also the same in, like, Europe and Asia. We'll probably see, like, I would really love blimps to come back. That's my, like, that's my new space tower is blimps. I want to ride one so bad.
In China,
But
they
I,
are
I think a lot
making
about.
zeppelins right now. So
I know. I saw there was a guy who tried to get a couple of millionaires in Canada to invest in his Zeppelin field that was gonna be near Hamilton, and they were like, "No, it's too dangerous," and I was so mad. I was
mm-hmm.
like, Zeppelins need to make a comeback. But yeah, we're gonna have so much stuff left over after all this that I feel like there's gonna be people whose entire job will just be to, like, break it down and process it into stuff that is in a stable form that we can use for the future. Like, I imagine there's going to be so many phones and computers and just junk electronics that they can't ship anywhere that we just have here sitting, that are going to have to get broken down into their base materials so that they can be reprocessed later into new tech, probably. But yeah, we have more than we need. And I don't know why everyone keeps thinking, like, we're all going to be impoverished when this whole thing collapses. We're going to have more stuff and more time than we know what to do with.
Yeah, no, actually, I think that's a good point. Um, I mean, because people say, "Oh my gosh, it's gonna be terrible." Like the global economy. Another kind of dovetailing off of that, the global economy is gonna collapse. And I was like, what's gonna happen is less, ancient, millions of year old captured sunlight that's being processed. That is under the ground in oil, and that is being sucked out. The chemical bonds that release the stored sun's energy will not be released at quite the same rate because of a 20% shutdown in the global, fossil fuel energy supply. And but kind of like we just said, like we already have a slight taste of that. It's not necessarily when capitalism collapses, but it's going to involve a sudden, less unnecessary use of energy and resources, and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
lives. Yeah, as you said, aside from the illness, sicknesses, and chronic fatigue syndrome, and lots of negative impacts that had in terms of the virus itself. But like people's lives are despite use, because there was a global drop of significant drop in total energy expenditure, and lives did get better. But this is part of the I think this is part to as we're trying to wrap this up, that's part of the sick minds imperial propaganda to keep empire going, is that line going down, like economic collapse is somehow a negative. Like, oh my God, the worst thing, we have to do everything possible, including send all of the US, NATO, and everyone to South Korea. We all got to make weapons, everyone, and we got to fly into Iran, and we got to just blow them up because, right, if we don't clench the final, like this will break the clenched fist on the iron fist of the West 2,000-year failed experiment on the earth, and we'll all be free from this idea that we have to make line go up by overconsuming resources and burning the world with too many Versace and iPhones that we don't need, right? So and so I think that's like, so I think that's part of the, I mean, just kind of dovetailing what you said about how like people need to accept that like the collapse, including like sudden drop of energy usage, it's not going to go to zero. And if you really want to be renewable, then a sudden drop in this fossil fuel energy usage is going to just put a lot of pressure to let's increase the solar output, like for real, seriously, and like not just leave it all to because now they're talking about, we need to bring some EVs into the United States from China because they've been trying to basically bar them from bringing any products in. Maybe we should you're gonna have to, but the part of it is you have to bite the bullet. You have to take the hubristic hit that maybe the West doesn't have all the solutions to all the problems, and you can't just be antagonistic to the East and the South. And they're gonna have to teach you how to do things, and you're gonna have to learn, and you're gonna have to not make tons of money, and you're gonna have to not be the technological dominator, and you're gonna have to like learn like how to, because they are doing things like taking apart older products. I just was reading about an article about how they can extract like lithium, gold, platinum, all these elements out of old electronics, for old phones, old laptops, and then reutilize those in a circular economy. But that's not technology the West has, and they don't really give a crap about, like, they just want to triple, quadruple, and quintuple down on fossil fuel, right? And max, we throw old stuff away, we make new stuff by blowing up countries and stealing their minerals, their metals, and oil, and we control the oil flows through choke points, right, through the Scholastic Empire that goes back to the British and French, and we're just going to control we're going to control the whole planet and everything that moves anywhere, and we're going to waste most of it. We're going to waste 95% of it, but it's kind of like, but it's like that. It's like it's still like colonial illness. Like, no, but I know it's a waste, and I know we're burning everything, we're breaking everything, but I need to control it, right, because I have this post-traumatic Greco-Roman trauma disorder. And so I feel like, anyway.
No, that was great. No, and it's been great talking to you. I should go.
For sure.
I feel like I'm fading.
No, I gotta go eat. I gotta eat my own lunch. Anyways, if you want to wrap up anything else you feel like you want to say where people can find anything, or any final.
No, just if people want to go check out Hill Agency and leave a comment, a review is always helpful on Steam. Makes my day. But I'm kind of in the long growing roots phase right now for my next stuff. So might be another year or two before you see anything from me.
Oh, okay, definitely. Definitely go check out Hill Agency. It's a really awesome game. Really great game. Did you leave it a review? I left mine. Definitely look forward to hearing, seeing what else you have to offer. I like the beadwork, by the way. Great job.
Oh, thank you.
Great messages. Yeah.
Very angry.
Valid, righteous anger. Yeah. Anyways, you know who I am, Silver Spook. You find, Neo Future. I feel like I don't have to do. Everybody knows who I am. But yeah, look for Silver Spook, and again, just great talking to Meagan Byrne, Achimo Games, and I'm really bad at wrapping up these kind of things. So if you want, you want to have the final words. Yeah.
No, I got nothing.
Got nothing. Okay. Aloha, mahalo, and build your own Ahupua'a system wherever you're at, with whatever characteristics of the place. Okay, I blew that one. Never mind.
You gotta write one ahead of time and just use it every time.
That's what I gotta do. I have one for streams. I always say the same thing, but I don't have that. I don't have the podcast one. So, anyways, I'll wrap it up with okay, bye everybody.